So, hello students, I welcome you all in today's NIOS lecture series. So, the topic of today's title is the carbohydrate metabolism, that is part 3 we will discuss. So, student मैंने पहले भी डिस्कस किया है कार्बोहाइड्रेट मेटाबॉलिज्म, जिसमें कि हमने ये डिस्कस किया था अबाउट दी ग्लाइकोलिसिस, अबाउट दी ग्लूकोनियोजेनेसिस. आज हम कार्बोहाइड्रेट मेटाबॉलिज्म पार्ट 3 डिस्कस करेंगे, जिसमें कि हम डिस्कस करेंगे अबाउट दी पेंटोज फॉस्फेट पाथवे, विच इज़ आल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट पाथवे ऑफ द कार्बोहाइड्रेट मेटाबॉलिज्म. सो व्हाट इज carbohydrate metabolism? Basically, carbohydrate metabolism basically it uses how, for example, glucose molecule, how glucose molecule is known to basically involve in the various metabolic processes, right? So what is the objective of this today's lectures, right? So first of all, you will be able to define the pentose phosphate pathway and its significance, and you will be able to distinguish between the two phases of the pentose phosphate pathway, that is the oxidative and the non-oxidative phases. So there are two type of phases, oxidative and non-oxidative. You will be also able to understand what are the key enzyme steps during the metabolic processes. So जैसा कि मैंने पहले भी लेक्चर में बताया कि जितने भी मेटाबॉलिक एक्टिविटीज़ हैं बॉडी की, they are being completed by the enzymes. So here you will be able to know that what are the enzymes which is known to involve in the key steps of the pentose phosphate pathway, and the importance and the roles of the NADPH molecule as well as the ribose 5-phosphate. So students, NADPH and ribose 5-phosphate ये दो मॉलिक्यूल इस पेंटोज फॉस्फेट पाथवे में प्रोड्यूस होते हैं, जो कि बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करते हैं. सो यू विल बी एबल टू नो, यू विल एबल टू एक्सप्लेन once you will learn about the pentose phosphate pathway, what is the importance of NADPH and the ribose 5-phosphate, and you will also able to relate the pentose phosphate pathway to metabolic needs and the cellular functions. Means when the cells needs this pathway for different functions, for example, the your cells have a lot of functions like cell to cell communication. There are the various type of biochemical processes taking place which needs the energy, so that comes from the metabolic pathways. So that is your learning objectives. So now let us go to the pathway of your yes. So now this pathway is also called as the hexose monophosphate shunt. Hexose monophosphate shunt, right? And where this process takes place in a cell, it takes place in a cell in this cell cytoplasm, right? So there are two components of a cell, cytoplasm and the nucleus, right? But this pathway which is actually taking place in a cell of its cytoplasmic part. Why it is taking place in a cytoplasm? Because in cytoplasm the enzymes of pentose phosphate pathway is present in a cell. So that is why it is taking place in a cytosol. This pathway is the alternate pathway of the glucose metabolism, right? तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ कि अगर glycolysis is somehow it is being inhibited, so what are the another way by which cell gets energy for the metabolic processes? So by that pathway, by the process of the pentose phosphate pathway, they metabolize the glucose molecule. That is why it is calling as a alternative pathway. Here in this pathway ATP molecule is not produced, like in the glycolysis I told you previously that in the glycolysis there is a production of the ATP molecule, but here ATP is not produced, but you will be having the another molecule like NADPH and ribose 5 phosphate, which play a very important functions, which play important role as a antioxidant defense system. That is the importance of the pathway. This is about the introduction of the pentose phosphate pathway, right. Now let us see what are the how this pathway is basically how the glycolysis and the your pentose phosphate pathway, they are interconnected, right. So if you see the figure, actually now you see the top portion where the glucose is converted into glucose 6 phosphate, right, and it enters into the glycolysis, right. Here if you see on the left hand side, basically right here, so what will happen here, the precursor molecule, the glucose 6 phosphate, this glucose 6 phosphate basically it enters into the pentose phosphate pathway, where there is the formation of the various type of intermediates, right, that is known to convert into the another its form, right, and then again this form is known to connect to the glycolysis steps. So what is this figure? Actually this figure is basically your relationship. This figure is the relationship between the glycolysis and the pentose phosphate pathway, right. So here the glucose 6 phosphate molecule, which is the intermediate of the glycolysis, that enters into the pentose phosphate pathway, where it produces the NADPH molecule, right, and the ribose 5 phosphate. Understand? Now then you can see that, you can say that these two pathways are the interlinked, and further this molecule your pentose molecule, that is known to convert into different form, isoforms, right, and then one of the isoform is basically your ribose 5 phosphate, and you know that ribose is the sugar, right, which are known to make the nucleotides, right. Then and these nucleotides are precursor molecule for the DNA. These precursor molecule are the basically known to involve in the formation of the RNA. So nucleic acid formation is there. So that is the importance of this pathway, where it produces the ribose 5 phosphate, which is the key molecule for the synthesis of the nucleic acid, and NADPH, which is produced during this pathway, it play a very important role in the defense system, which I will explain you in few slides. So now let us see how is basically your yes. So as I told you, this there are two phases. This basically your pathway consists of two phases. One is the oxidative phase, right? Another is the non-oxidative phase. So what happen in the oxidative phases? All the biochemical reactions, they are the irreversible. Irreversible means which takes place only in one directions, and this pathway produces the NADPH molecule and the ribose 5 phosphate, which is the important precursor for the your nucleotides, which finally make the nucleic acids. And in the non-oxidative phase, it is the reversible phase. What do you mean by reversible phase? Reversible phase is the phase where your product and the reactant, they are interconvertible to each other, right? And in this non-oxidative phase, basically it converts to glycolytic intermediates, right? For example, fructose 6 phosphate, glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. What are these? These are the glycolysis intermediate, as I told you in the my previous lectures series, where I told you about the carbohydrate metabolism, which focuses on glycolysis. So here these fructose 6 phosphate and glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, they are the glycolysis intermediates. So in non-oxidative phase, there is the formation of the glycolytic intermediate. For example, your fructose 6 phosphate, glyceraldehyde 6 phosphate, and so on. But in the oxidative phase, it produces the NADPH molecule and the ribose 5 phosphate, and the reaction of the oxidative phase, they are the irreversible. So that is how you can distinguish between these two phases. Understand? So now let us see the another reactions of the your pentose phosphate pathway. Here if you see the figure, right, that is the your oxidative and the non-oxidative. So in oxidative phase, what you are seeing here, the glucose 6 phosphate molecule, which is the your reaction intermediate of the glycolysis, it is the precursor molecule, or you can say it is the start point of the pentose phosphate pathway. So glucose 6 phosphate, you see there is a formation of different intermediate. For example, glucose 6 phosphate is produced into the 6 phosphogluconolactone molecule. Here there is a presence of the enzyme trans ketolase, trans aldolase enzyme, and from 6 phosphogluconate molecule there is a formation of the your ribulose 5 phosphate. Ribulose 5 phosphate, it undergo the isomerization reaction where it form the ribose 5 phosphate, and as I told you, ribose 5 phosphate, it is the precursor molecule for the formation of the nucleotides, for the formation of the coenzymes, and which ultimately make the your DNA, your nucleic acid, DNA and RNA. Now if you see the right hand side one, right, where at certain step of the oxidative phase there is the formation of the NADPH molecule from the NADP. So now this NADPH molecule, it is important. It is important in the formation of the free radicals that ultimately kill our cells, that ultimately damage the protein, that ultimately damage the nucleic acid, right, of the our cell, and cell will die. Understand? But when this NADPH will produce, it prevent the formations, so that cell can basically free from the your free radicals. So I will tell you in the few slides after that how this NADPH molecule and the ribose 5 phosphate, that is play important role, and why this pathway is important. So as I told you that the carbohydrate metabolism, it has basically, especially the pentose phosphate pathway, which basically dependent on the several key stages, and these several key stages basically they are known to completed by specific enzymes. So student, as I told you many times in my previous lectures of the carbohydrate metabolism, that every step, every biochemical steps in a cell it is being completed by specific enzymes. So here also in the pentose phosphate pathway, there are certain enzymes which are present in the cytoplasm of the cell, which are known to complete the steps of the your pentose phosphate pathway, which actually produces the your ribose 5 phosphate and your NADPH molecule, and that NADPH molecule is actually play important role in the defense system. So this is the steps of the important steps of the your pentose phosphate pathway, like the precursor molecule glucose 6 phosphate, that is the your reaction intermediate of glycolysis. Now here this glucose 6 phosphate is converted into 6 phosphogluconolactone molecule, and this step is being completed by the enzyme called glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. In short, we call as a CG6PD, right? Glucose, G stand for glucose, 6 is the position where the phosphate group is attached, and dehydrogenase, D stand for dehydrogenase. So this step produces the NADPH molecule. Understand? So that means the glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase is the enzyme which actually known to involve in the formation of NADPH, and NADPH is the molecule which prevent the formation of your free radicals that ultimately kill the our cells. So that means यहाँ पे मैं आपको ये बताना चाहता हूँ स्टूडेंट्स कि अगर ये एंजाइम्स, if this enzyme is absent, which enzyme? Glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. So in a person in which this enzyme is absent, or if any defect in the pentose phosphate pathway, so this enzyme will not functional. Ultimately what happen? NADPH molecule will be not produced. So what happened to that person? So in that person, since NADPH is not produced because there is the inactivation of glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. So what will happen? In that person, there is the high chance of the formation of the free radicals that ultimately kill these cells by damaging the DNA, protein and lipid content, and cell will die. Now the second step of this basically cycle is the conversion of 6 phosphogluconolactone to 6 phosphogluconolactone to 6 phosphogluconate molecule. So here the enzyme is the lactanase enzyme. So there is a intern conversion between these two molecules, and the third step is the conversion of 6 phosphogluconolactone to ribulose 5 phosphate, and here enzyme is the your 6 phosphogluconolactone dehydrogenase, and in this step there is the also formation of NADPH molecule as well as carbon dioxide molecule will be produced. So now here student, the ribulose 5 phosphate, from ribulose 5 phosphate there is the formation of the ribose 5 phosphate, and that ribose 5 phosphate is the precursor molecule for the formation of the nucleic acids. So that means if this enzyme, your 6 phosphogluconolactonate dehydrogenase, is inactivated, or if this step of the pentose phosphate pathway is inactivated, so that means the formation of ribulose 5 phosphate is being stopped. Ribulose 5 phosphate production, it will stop. Ultimately what will happen? there will be nucleoside in the concentration of nucleotide in a cell, it will be less. So that means it will, the process of nucleotide formation will be inhibited, and nucleotide is the key component of the nucleic acids like the DNA and RNA. So ultimately your nucleic acid formation will be inhibited. So this step is also very important step, because it is the, in this step there is a formation of the molecule which actually produces the ribose 5-phosphate, which is acting as a precursor molecule for the nucleic acids. So these first step and your third step is very important, right, where the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase which produces the NADPH and 6-phosphogluconate gluconate dehydrogenase which also produces NADPH, and in this step your ribulose 5-phosphate is produced, which makes the your ribose 5-phosphate, that is the precursor for nucleic acids. Now let us see the reactions. Now if you see this reaction, like I told you, your glucose 6-phosphate, it is known to convert into 6-phosphogluconolactone and then 6-phosphogluconate molecule. Here you see the specific enzymes which are known to involve, which are being highlighted as a your blue color left hand side of the reactions, like glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. So what is this? This is the enzymes. These are the enzymes which are known to involve in the formation of the your 6-phosphogluconolactone molecule. This 6-phosphogluconolactone molecule, it produces the 6-phosphogluconate, right, and then from 6-phosphogluconate there is a formation of the ribulose 5-phosphate, and ribulose 5-phosphate, it undergo the isomerization reactions where it produces the ribose 5-phosphate. So we will take a small break and then we will resume the session. Thank you. सो ब्रेक के बाद अगेन आई वेलकम यू ऑल. सो स्टूडेंट्स, अभी हमने क्या डिस्कस किया टिल नाउ. So till now what I told you, that what is the pentose phosphate pathway, right? What are the phases of the pentose phosphate pathway, oxidative and non-oxidative? How oxidative and non-oxidative pathway they are differ between each other, right? And what is the relationship? What is the relationship between the glycolysis and the pentose phosphate pathway? And we are discussing about at present time we are discussing about the reactions of the pentose phosphate pathway, right? So the precursor molecule for the pentose phosphate pathway is the glucose 6 phosphate. And that glucose 6 phosphate, how it is coming? ग्लूकोज 6 फॉस्फेट ये कहाँ से आ रहा है, किस पाथवे के थ्रू? इट इज़ कमिंग थ्रू दी ग्लाइकोलिसिस, राइट? सो दैट इज़ दी बेसिक, दैट इज़ हाउ यू कैन से ग्लाइकोलिसिस एंड दी योर pentose phosphate pathway, they are interlinked, which I told you in the relationship diagram also. So here you see the glucose 6 phosphate, it is known to convert into the another intermediate, that is a 6 phosphogluconolactone molecule under the presence of the enzyme which is called as glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. तो इस स्टेप में हो क्या रहा है कि NADP plus which is the nicotinamide dinucleotide that is known to convert into the right NADPH, where this NADPH molecule is known to involve in the formation of the defense system, which I will discuss. And then this 6 phosphogluconolactone molecule is converted into 6 phosphogluconate molecule, and that 6 phosphogluconate molecule is convert into again different intermediate which is called as ribulose 5 phosphate. Here also in this step there is the formation of the NADPH molecule जो कि right hand side of the डायग्राम में शो किया गया NADPH का कैसे बनता है यहाँ पे. एंड देन दिस 5 ribulose 5 phosphate, it is known to convert into ribose 5 phosphate. Now here the ribose 5 phosphate जो कि पिंक कलर से हाईलाइट किया गया है, now it is important. Now it is ribose 5 phosphate is important because this ribose 5 phosphate is the precursor for the nucleotides, and nucleotide is the precursor for nucleic acid, DNA and RNA. So that means this pathway has a role in the your nucleotide biosynthesis, and nucleotide biosynthesis they are known to form the nucleic acid. So this is the one important significance. Another important significance is the production of the NADPH molecule, which play important role in the defense system. Now I would like to tell you about the importance of the NADPH, which has been produced during the 2 steps of the pentose phosphate pathway. राइबोस 5 phosphate का तो मैंने यहाँ बताया कि इसका इम्पोर्टेंस क्या है. इसका इम्पोर्टेंस ये है कि वो न्यूक्लियोटाइड्स का प्रिकर्सर मॉलिक्यूल्स है, और न्यूक्लियोटाइड्स फिर न्यूक्लिक एसिड दे विल फॉर्म लाइक दी योर RNA एंड DNA. नाउ लेट अस सी हाउ बेसिकली योर दिस पाथवे basically known to involve in the another pathways. Now here you see the non-oxidative reactions. Like as I told you, there are 2 phases, oxidative and non-oxidative phases. So oxidative phase, where I told you the formation of the ribose 5 phosphate and the your NADPH. Here in the non-oxidative process, you have the intern conversion of the different type of carbon sugar, right? Carbon 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the enzymes are the trans ketolase and the trans aldolase enzymes, and the product of the non-oxidative are the ribose 5 phosphate, that is important for the nucleotide synthesis. And these pathways also produce the products of the glycolysis, as I told you, like the fructose 6 phosphate. F6P stand for fructose 6 phosphate, your glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So this non-oxidative pathway, it produces the intermediates of the glycolysis as well as the ribose 5 phosphate, which is being used for nucleotide biosynthesis. Now let us see basically this NADPH molecule which I told you. This NADPH molecule which is produced during the your pentose phosphate pathway, right? So here you basically try to understand what are the functions of pentose phosphate pathway. So as I told you, learners, this pentose phosphate pathway produces NADPH. NADPH, what it do? NADPH basically these are known to involve in the biosynthesis of fatty acids, cholesterol molecule. Also, this NADPH maintain the reduced glutathione molecule to fight with the oxidative stress. This is one of the very important function of the NADPH. The NADPH which is produced during the pentose phosphate pathway. So there are two steps where this NADPH molecule is produced, and what they do after production, they form fatty acid, right? They form the cholesterol molecule. Our body has the enzyme which produces the cholesterol, because cholesterol is also known to form different type of hormone, male sex hormone, female sex hormone. So the cholesterol which body form, it also act as a precursor molecules, as well as this NADPH is also known to fight with the oxidative stress which maintain the glutathione level. The second important function of this pathway is the production of the ribose 5 phosphate, because it form the nucleic acid, it form the DNA RNA synthesis, right? And the metabolic flexibility, right? Why metabolic flexibility? Because this pathway links with the glycolysis. How it is linked with the glycolysis? Because I told you in the beginning of the lecture that the glucose 6 phosphate molecule, once it is produced from the glycolysis, it enters in the pentose phosphate pathway. So that is how the metabolic flexibility will be maintained by linking of this pathway with the glycolysis. That is the important functions of this pathway, and all these functions are important. Now let us see, learners, how this NADPH molecule which is produced, how it basically fight with the oxidative stress. That is important. Now you see in this figure, actually, now in this figure I would like to basically tell you first of all how basically free radicals are being produced, right? So there are various ways by which free radicals are being produced. So these free radicals are being produced by in the mitochondria, right? These free radicals are being produced when we take certain drugs, certain medicines, right? Like sulfur drugs, certain anti-malarial drugs, right, herbicides, that we are taking medicines, right, that produces the oxygen free radical, that is called as the superoxide radicals. That superoxide radical, when it is produced during such processes, that superoxide radicals, they are known to convert into hydrogen peroxide. So this hydrogen peroxide is being further broken by the enzyme called glutathione peroxidase. So now glutathione peroxidase enzyme is important. Glutathione peroxidase enzyme is important. Why? Because it prevents the formation of hydrogen peroxide, and hydrogen peroxide is lethal for the human being, lethal for the plants. Why? Because this hydrogen peroxide, they are known to convert into hydroxyl free radicals, and these hydroxyl free radicals, when it is produced from the hydrogen peroxide, this hydroxyl free radical, it will damage the DNA, it will damage the proteins, it will damage the lipids. So ultimately what happened? Ultimately the cell will die. So this is the what? This is called as the oxidative stress, which has been shown in the left hand side of the figure, where you can see different free radicals are being produced in a cell by the molecular oxygens. Now, how this pentose phosphate pathway is important in these steps, which actually prevent, जो कि इस प्रोसेस को रोकता है. कैसे रोकता है, यहाँ पे मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ. अगर आप राइट हैंड साइड वाला डायग्राम देखें, जहाँ पे कि ग्लूकोज 6 फॉस्फेट मॉलिक्यूल, ये ग्लूकोज 6 फॉस्फेट मॉलिक्यूल ये कन्वर्ट हो रहा है 6 फॉस्फो ग्लूकोलैक्टोन में, और इस प्रोसेस में NADPH का फॉर्मेशन होता है, राइट. और ये हमारा किसका स्टेप है? ये हमारा पेंटोज फॉस्फेट पाथवे का स्टेप है. नाउ ये NADPH करता क्या है? ये NADPH ये ग्लूटाथायोन के फॉर्मेशन में हेल्प करता है. ग्लूटाथायोन हमारा दो फॉर्म है यहाँ पे, ऑक्सीडाइज एंड रिड्यूस फॉर्म. तो यहाँ पे है GSSG विच इज दी योर ऑक्सीडाइज फॉर्म ऑफ द ग्लूटाथायोन, and then your GSH which is the reduced form of the glutathione. So that NADPH is known to involve in the conversion of the oxidized form to reduced form, and this reduced form, now if you see जो dotted line से show किया गया है, in that what it basically tell you, it GSH molecule that is actually preventing. Now if you see the cross X-shaped structure, right, that means the GSH molecule ये basically इस process को inhibit कर रहा है. Sorry, now you are basically seeing this process where your GSH molecule, they are known to prevent the formation of the hydroxyl free radicals, and that hydroxyl free radicals which basically damage the your protein, DNA as well as lipid content. So that is how you can say that these pathway play important role in the prevention of the formation of the hydroxyl free radicals from the oxygen molecules, where this NADPH is important because the electrons from the your NADPH, they are known to involve in the conversion of the oxidized glutathione to reduced form, and it is the reduced form of the glutathione which is actually preventing the formation of the hydrogen peroxide free radicals, because free radicals, they are very highly stable molecules which can react with the another chemical molecule. तो protein DNA ये क्या है? They are the chemical molecules. Protein is made up of amino acid, DNA is made up of nucleotides. So that is how it can react and it can damage. But when the process of pentose phosphate pathway takes place, which actually produces the NADPH, and NADPH are known to involve in the formation of reduced form of the glutathione, and that glutathione is known to involve in the prevention of the hydrogen peroxide hydroxyl free radicals, which ultimately killing the damaging the cell by damaging the protein DNA as well as lipid content. So स्टूडेंट यहाँ पे एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्ट है कि ये ग्लूकोज 6 फॉस्फेट डिहाइड्रोजिनेज एंजाइम इम्पॉर्टेंट है. वाई? क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पे अगर ग्लूकोज 6 फॉस्फेट डिहाइड्रोजिनेज एंजाइम एब्सेंट होगा तो NADPH का फॉर्मेशन नहीं होगा, एज वेल एज 6 फॉस्फोग्लूकोनोलैक्टोन फॉर्मेशन भी नहीं होगा. तो क्या होगा उस केस में? देयर इज अ हाई चांस दैट this hydroxyl free radical will form. There is a formation of the hydroxyl free radicals which ultimately damage the cells, which actually kill the cell by damaging the lipid protein as well as DNA. Right? So that is how you can say that this pentose phosphate pathway has a very important function in the oxidative stress. Right? And if this enzyme is deficient, अगर इस एंजाइम की कमी होती है हमारे बॉडी में या प्लांट में या एनी ऑर्गेनिज्म, तो दैट मीन्स दिस देयर इज द योर formation of the free radical will takes place, right? So this is the what actually the summary of the lecture, right, which I told you. The pentose phosphate pathway is the alternative pathway of glucose metabolism, pathways. It form the NADPH, it form the ribose phosphate. Both these two are very important. As I told you that the NADPH produces the antioxidant in the defense system, ribose 5-phosphate nucleotide biosynthesis, right? And these pathways are highly active in the liver, adipose tissue, adrenal gland, and the red blood cells. These are the certain outcomes of the lectures that upon completion of the this module you will be able to explain the phases, key steps of the pentose phosphate pathway, biological importance of NADPH, ribose 5-phosphate, and how pentose phosphate pathway basically integrates with the overall cellular metabolism, right? And the clinical significance in which there will be deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. So with this I thank you all for listening the lectures, and I think it will be beneficial for you. So thank you so much.